Alright, this week we're going to go with one of my original patterns here. This one is an offshoot of the landing strip. It's in the same series. This one's the Brazilian. It's a little bit more sparse, I guess would be the best way to put it, as opposed to the landing strip. This one is, those two are not going to win any beauty pageants, I will tell you that much. These are not, you can see it in the vise here, I mean, it's not a sexy fly by any means. Where this thing excels, and the landing strip for that matter, is in the high dirty water, because this thing just pushes a ton of water, gets the fish's attention, and you get a lot of eats on this pattern. I've done well on this in the high dirty stuff. I slimmed it down a little bit. The landing strip's still a good fly. Still a great fly in my opinion. A little biased there, but it still catches a lot of fish. But I'm telling you that you fish that thing too long and your arm's going to be sore. I mean, it has a pile of weight. It can get laborsome fishing that one all day long, just because, I mean, it pushes so much water, it retains so much water, but there's a ton of motion. There really is. So in an effort to slim that one down a little bit, I came up with this, and there's a few minor differences that I do, and I'll try to hit on them as best I can as I go through the video. But I'm going to zoom in just slightly on this. I'm going to go ahead and sort through all of the Marabou right now. Zoom in just a little bit more here. So we're going to go ahead and just sort through this Marabou before I get started, and that way I can kind of explain it. We'll get that one out of the vise, and we'll go in through this. So what this uses is 2 pieces on the back, and then 3 pieces on the front hook. And with this, we're palmering all of these. So we're going to palmer 5 pieces of Marabou all together. And with this, I mean, you want something like this right here. I mean, this would be, I know the detail's probably not coming in too great. This right here would be okay. I mean, I'm actually going to take that one. It's on the sparse side. I'm going to start with that one on the back. When you do this pattern, just like almost all of the streamers that we do, you want to go from, you know, you want to build a taper the entire way up. So you start with your sparse stuff, and then you work your way to the front. Make sure that these are going to be good palmered, or good feathers to palmer. Just go through here and make sure that they have good flexibility. If it's rigid all the way up at the top here, don't even mess around with that thing. Just leave it for some other application, or just throw it out altogether. So we're going to progress on this one, and you can see this one's a little bit thicker than the one that we're going to use on the back, and I'm just going to pre-sort these out here right like this, and make sure that we get the right material that we're after. That way it gives that nice taper to your fly, and you're not going to wind up with you know, awkward looking sections throughout the body on this. Because if you go taking something that's more suited for a tail, say something along, that's a good one right there for the front hook, something along this line, I mean, it's more suited for a tail. It's really sparse. It makes a great tail, not so much great for palmering. So we're just going to go ahead, be real selective on this stuff. I mean, when I tie these in bulk, or when I'm production tying these, I sort through these, and I have 2 different piles, my back half and my front half. This is a great, really wispy feather right here. Or not wispy, this is a great, really full feather. And it has some flexibility even halfway through the shaft on that one. So that one's still good. That's going to be a good front section. And then we're going to need one more. This one's perfect right here. So this one has just all sorts of, you can see that one. I mean, it's really nice and thick. You're able to use 3/4 of this all the way through. I mean, that's going to be a really good feather. So when you're selecting these, just make sure that you are selective and get the right material for the application. The rest of this can go off to the side for now. Well, we're not going to need it at all anymore. Actually, it can go off to the side. So we're going to go ahead and get zoomed in here, and we're going to start tying. The back half on this one, or the back hook on this one, is a MFC 7050 size 6. If you want to do the Daiichi 2460s, 2461, they're essentially the same hook. And I left my contacts in on this one, so I'm kind of blurry tying, so we'll see how this goes. We'll go ahead and get our thread started. I want to start this stuff at about the halfway point on this hook, just past the halfway at most. And then I'm going to go ahead and come in here, and when you're doing this Palmer style, find your flexible point. You can see where that naturally bends. When I grab this at the top and the bottom, you can see where that feather is bending naturally, and then you just strip. You can go down below that just slightly, but just strip all of this excess off, and then that's the section that you're going to be working with. So we're going to go ahead and get this tied in. I leave myself a little bit. When I stand this up, I have about 1/8 of an inch that is free to move around. I just tie these in, just straight. I don't worry about getting them lined up nice and even to where they're coming perpendicular to the hook or anything. I leave that 1/8 of an inch, and they're able to rotate on their own. You'll see as I get this going here. Bring this off to the side, you get that one nice rotation around, and then you're starting right up to the front. Don't worry about your spacing. Don't worry about one wrap in front of the other. Just make sure that your material isn't trapped. That's the only thing that you're really concerned about on this when you palmer your Marabou. So I'm going to get that out of the way, and then I'm just going to peel this back. I'll wet my fingers a little bit, and then I'm just going to peel this back slightly. And I'm going to take some loose wraps. Just get that covered up. And then I'm going to take a couple of tight wraps right over top of that. Everything's how I want it. Everything looks good there. So now, in between this is there's going to be a little bit of internal flash, and this is just black UV puller chenille. With this puller chenille, always make sure, sometimes it's really tough to determine which way these fibers are going. This package especially, it's just kind of all over the place. But you want your materials, typically they stand back in one direction when they braid this stuff. So when you pull this back, you can kind of see how they are going in one direction there, and you want your material going back toward the hook point. So I'm just going to take this and I'm going to stretch it, get a little bit of that coil out of there, trim off this excess section, and get out of there. And what this does, I'm only doing probably 3 wraps on this. I'm not putting a ton of wraps in here, but all this really does is gives you a little bit of internal flash. It doesn't stand out a ton. There you can see all my materials heading straight back. It's bleeding back into that first section of Marabou I tied in. It doesn't stand out a ton, like I was saying, when this thing is dry, but once this thing's in the water and it gets wet, this thing, it brings that internal flash out, and it really looks good. Really gives a nice look to this fly. Now I know you're saying, well, hey, you fish this in dirty water. What the heck's the difference? Sometimes, as this thing comes up to the surface, you get that light penetration in there, and it just barely catches, that light penetration barely catches the this UV puller. Sometimes it sticks out like a sore thumb. It really does. And that's not to say that I don't fish this when the water's in good condition. I really don't fish it when it's gin clear. But off-colored water, This is definitely one of the ones that I go to first. And then to finish off the back hook on this one, I'm just going to take one more piece of Marabou, and we're going to take this right up to the front. Go ahead and get this tied in. Same as before, finding that flex point in the stem and then working with that up. So, same thing, find a good spot on this one. Go ahead and grab this with your pliers, spin this around, 1, 2, and just work this all the way up to the front of the hook, right up to your eye. Get everything out of the way as best you can. Tie this off. And you're good. And wet your fingers. Peel this back. Be careful when you're doing this. It's really easy to continually catch the point of that hook in your thumb. After you do it about 30 or 40 times, it doesn't really tickle too much. So I'm just going to peel this back, and you can see, I mean, there it is. There's the back half of this. You can see that internal flash coming through a little bit. Like I said, when this thing gets wet, that's when that really shows up. Go ahead and whip finish. Get that out of the way. And then take your marker, and we're just going to touch this up slightly. Now, with the landing strip, like I was saying, one of the differences with this one and the landing strip is it's kind of, well, not kind of, it's more sparse than the landing strip is more sparse, or has more bulk to it than the Brazilian. I used to put this Arctic Fox on both the front and the back hook, and I had more wraps of Marabou in here. Well, the hook was bigger too. I used a 4 and then a 2 in the front, and it just had more room for material, and it's a huge fly. It really is. And you'll see when, well, you saw it earlier when I had the finished one in the vise. This thing is big. The landing strip is it was a little bit excessive, but boy, does it move water. So like I said, I kind of took a little bit out of this one, and this also gives that tail a little bit more freedom. It allows it to whip around a lot more. The front of this still gives that nice pause because there's extra material. It's heavier. It pushes the water. The back half flips around a lot. So while it is bulky, there's still a pile of motion to this one. So I'm going to go ahead and get the 140 in here and then get these eyes tied in. Just going to go ahead and get my thread base down. And then one loop around the dumbbell eyes, get them in position, and then start working my way around this. There we go. We'll flip those around, touch this with a little zap. And make sure everything's how we like it. Go ahead and get your thread base down here to get prepped to put your wire in. I'll take this all the way back to where the barb starts the ascent. Get a little bit more of a thread base down, and we're good. Make sure that our eyes are lined up how we want it. They're not off center. And it looks pretty good right there. Next, I'm going to take this wire that I have pre-cut, and I'm just grabbing one bead on this one. You can do two if you want to give yourself a little bit more distance. I tend to, on this pattern, just go with the one small bead. I think these are 3/0. I get these from the craft store. Get a couple thousand of them for $3. Oh, there's a black dog. Same thing that I talked about before on this wire. Make sure that that loop or the natural curve to this, you're working with it. There's that natural curve that I'll bring another one of these up here so you can see it. Here's this natural curve that comes out, you know, when you pre-cut these or when you just cut them coming off of the spool. That natural curve, you want to put that down through the eye and keep that curve going this direction, and it won't fight you as much when you're trying to get this lined up on your connection point. It won't be kicked off to the side. It'll be following the same track as the bend on your front hook does. So we're going to go ahead and get this in here, and then always pull this forward. Make sure that these are running parallel to one another. You don't have them crossed up. And I think I just crossed everything. If I'm not mistaken, I did. I sure did. There we go. Everything's running parallel. We got a little kink in the back there. I'm not too concerned about spacing or anything just yet. I just want to throw this down on top, get this tied in, everything's secured, and have these wraps nice and loose so you're able to manipulate this wire any way you want to. Now you can see I have this tied in. It's just slightly shorter on this loop than I would like it. So there you can see that loop right there is about the same width as my bead, and I'm just going to come back here. I'm going to get everything tied in and secured, and now's when you can start getting a little bit of extra tension on these wraps. I mean, you don't have to go crazy on it. I mean, we're going to fold this stuff over itself and everything's going to be fine. So, but you can start giving it a little bit of extra tension. Flip this over on its side, double this back over, and the same thing with this. Double this over, and I'm going to go ahead and trim this if I can find my wire cutters here. Get that out of the way. That one out of the way. Hey, quit making all that noise over there. Alright, so we can go ahead and whip finish this. We'll switch back over to the gel spun. Get this tied in, and then I'm just going to take a few wraps while I'm up here. I'm going to take this GSP and go around my eyes just to give me a little bit of extra security. Work my way back. I'm going to leave this just shy of the barb of the hook. You don't have to worry too much about covering everything up, because you'll see as we get going on this, this material's going to cover that section up really well. So this one's dual purposed. It acts as a skirt and a body. We'll just go ahead, get that tied in, take it about up to your halfway point, and then whip finish, same thing. We're going to palmer this up. Don't worry again about your spacing. Just get this coming through here, get it all the way up to the front, or as far as it'll go. Pick this stuff out slightly. Just make sure you don't have a ton of material trapped. And then turn this around, get this tied off. Go ahead and wet your fingers again and go ahead and peel all of this back. and then just open loop this. I'm going to open loop this right to the point of my hook, and that's where I'm going to stop with my thread. You can see the hook point and my thread were sitting right there. We're starting to get a nice cover. You can still see a little bit of this coming through, but we're starting to get a pretty nice cover on this one. As we put the other Marabou pieces on here, it's going to marry back into this, and it's going to look pretty clean. You're not going to see that connection really. So now what I'm going to do again is go back to the UV, and this is just a little bit more internal flash, and it'll actually bleed in to that back section. Same thing, I'm just going to go 1 wrap, 2, 3, and then we're done. Go ahead and pull that tight. Give it a quick anchor wrap, and try not to trap too many of these fibers in there. And then you can trim that off. Peel this back just slightly and work this back. Now you can see all of your material minus one that's just not wanting to cooperate. Gone. All of your UV is going back into this skirt, and the UV's bleeding in. Once this gets wet, it's going to look like one continuous section of flash right down through the center. Which one do I like better? That's a better front piece right there. Same thing, continuing this process all the way up through. I'm going to take another piece of Marabou. Remember to progress as you go forward. Find your bulkier pieces and use those as you progress to the front. We're going to grab this section, and as you get these pieces that have the more bulk to them, you need to spend a little bit more time, probably every 2 or 3 wraps. If you notice yourself starting to trap material, 2 or 3 wraps, just run your fingers through it, get everything to where it's not running over top of itself and you don't have trapped material in there. Go ahead and take this back, same thing, just work this over, work this back in between, and then run with probably 2 to 3. And at this point I'm just about at the halfway point on this hook. I can probably go back 1 or 2 more wraps. I'm just about at the halfway point on this hook. So now we're going to move into the Arctic Fox, and what this does is this just allows this pattern to retain a little bit of bulk on the front. It helps with the overall taper. If you leave everything just how it is, this Marabou tends to kind of get matted down, and the fly will be like, not pencil thin, but it stays thin the entire way through. I wanted this to have a little bit more bulk in the top, or in the front section. I'm just going to run this through the comb real quick. I wanted a little bit more bulk in this front section. That way it gives that nice taper. And it also helps with the pause. Like when you're stripping this thing through the water, this captures more water. And it slows the front half down, allows the back half to give that extra little whip. And I'm just tying this in on the top portion here. You'll see I'll kind of work this around to where it's going probably that little half moon section as I roll this back over on the reverse tie. Now I'm just going to take this and I'm just going to roll my fingers. I hope the camera's picking this up too pretty good. You know, my fat fingers are in the way, so it's kind of tough, but I'm just rolling this material, giving like a half turn on it, or a half moon effect on this. There's the bulk on this. It's still staying in the front half of the fly. You can see it right there. I should have went with a lighter color, that way you can be able to see the contrast in it. But this is just going to retain your bulk, and as this next piece of Marabou comes over top of this, when this thing gets wet, you have that nice taper that goes all the way back your fly. We're going to take our last section of Marabou now. We're going to peel this back and then go ahead and get this tied in. Same thing, I tie this in the same way. Leave yourself about that 1/8 of an inch of free material. That way it's able to rotate and track the direction you want it to. You don't want your Marabou, when you spin it, to be, let me just pick a piece out here real quick. This is probably a pretty good example, even though it's not something that would be palmered. See how it has this nice little curve going back this direction? Well, when you rotate it, you want everything to naturally fall back that direction. You don't want it to be tied in this way and then you're fighting it constantly, and it's just going to make a mess when you wrap this stuff. And I'm busting material up already. It's pretty fragile up at the top, so I'm going to try and catch a little bit of the fibers and then make sure that I'm tracking the direction that I want. Get my one good wrap there, and then I'm just going to work this right up to my eyes, or as much as the feather will allow me to work it. And we're good there as long as I'm able to get this tied off. This thing looks like a mess right now. Like I said in the beginning, it's not going to win any beauty contests, but it'll hunt for sure. It'll hunt. Alright, same thing. I'm just going to wet my fingers, peel all of this Marabou back, get everything to where my hook's exposed. I don't have any trapped fibers, and I'm just going to work this back enough. I'm probably going 1/4 of an inch past where my eyes are. That's just enough to get the feathers to lay back, going in the same direction that I want. And you can see that black Arctic fox is completely covered up right now. I mean, you don't even know that it's in there. When I go with the tans and the olives, sometimes it's really tough to match up the colors, so it does wind up coming through, but it's still only on the top and the sides, so it doesn't really show through a ton on the actual fly. To finish this one up, I'm going with, this is kind of a layered effect that I use on this Senyo's laser dub. You can do this in 2 steps really if you want, but I found that it fills out a lot better this way, and the material doesn't get in the way of the eyes, and it doesn't make a mess if you kind of take this layered effect to it. So what I'm doing is I'm coming right underneath with my first piece, tighten that up, 1, 2. Same thing with your top section. Taking just about the same amount there. You can see I'm working with minimal material here. And then I'm just peeling this stuff out, making sure that I have a good sturdy center section. I'm going to loop this around, go right around my thread, get the cup, set this right on top, loose wrap, pull tight, that stuff's anchored. Now I'm going to work my way right up to the eyes. If you want to at this point, you don't really have to because it's going to be covered up by the rest of it, but on your first couple of these, I'd suggest, if you're using white thread, just go ahead and touching this up. If you're using the gel spun, if you're using black thread, then it doesn't matter. I mean, it's not going to come through. Now I'm probably going to be double of what I used on those first 2 sections. I'm just going to double this up, and I'm going to work right through here, make sure that everything, I got a good sturdy center section again, and I'm going to work this to where I have a little cone right there. I'm going to slide this over top of the eyes make sure that my coverage is about halfway. I'm going to go 1, 2, tighten down on the second. What I meant by my coverage being about halfway is my material is about, I'm tying this right about in the center of the material that I put on, and then I'm just going to fold this back, and I'm going to go right next to these eyes, 1, 2, and now I'm going to the front of them. This head is one of the bulkier ones that I tie with this laser dub. If you watch the October videos, the dink, whatever it is, I purposely have less material on them. With this one, and you'll see when I finish it up, it has that nice coned effect, and it just follows along with the overall profile of the fly that I'm trying to get. And I found with the more sparse heads on this one, the body kind of overpowers the head, and it doesn't quite give the kick that I want. It doesn't absorb the water that I want, doesn't push the water that I want. So I make these ones a little bit bulkier. And then the same thing right in front of the eyes. I throw this on here, get to the center point in your material. 1, 2, tighten it up. And I'm just going to fold this stuff back, and you can see where it's starting to make that nice, you're starting to get that really nice transition. It's starting to form a really nice clean head on this one. And then the last 2 pieces, I'm going to redo what I did in the back. I'm just tying one on the top and one on the bottom, and like I said, it gives you a nice layered effect on this head, and it really maintains its overall shape once it's in the water. This is used to push water, it's used to make a lot of noise, and it also slows down that back half. Well, it slows down the front half and allows that back half to whip around. So same thing, I'm coming on the underneath side, cupping it, going 1, 2, pull this tight, get a couple more wraps in there, and then we're good to whip finish. Get back here. There we go. Everything looks pretty solid there. Before I do anything else on this, before I color up my thread or anything, I just kind of take this brush, run it right through here, just kind of smooth everything out, bring it down the side, bring it on the bottom. Kind of clear this out of the way. Now you'll see, I'll just clear this material out, allow my eyes to be exposed. But when I'm fishing this pattern, because I don't trim this at all, I let the head stay the color that it is. You have some of this UV in here. That UV winds up marrying up to the front section, and then it marries up to that back section. So it has that nice color all the way through it the entire way. It's obviously a little more pronounced in the front than it is the back. But like I said, I don't trim this head like I do on the October. I'll stand the UV up and I'll give it a nice trim and everything. I don't with this one, like I said, mainly to be a water pusher. That's the main purpose on this one, is to just move as much water, cause as much of a disturbance as I can possibly get out of this fly. I said all of that to say, when I do fish this one, inevitably you are going to get some, make sure that I'm good. You are going to get some of these fibers that are going to interfere with your eye, and they're going to just run over the top of them. As you're fishing them, have your nippers, pair of scissors if you're in the boat, and just trim out what gets around your eye, and then that way it'll stay nice and clean for you and it won't be interfered with. But there is the Brazilian. If you guys have any questions or comments on this one, as always, leave them with me. And I will say one other thing for hooks on this. If you want to, because this front is so bulky and there's so much material there, you can go with comparable on length. If you want to go with like a B10 or a A-Rex, whatever it may be, just to have a little bit wider of a hook gap. If you find that you're running into this material with your gap, with your 7050s or 2461s a lot, change it up to a bigger hook. I mean, that or control your material just a little bit more, go a little bit more sparse. But I haven't had any issues with the 7050s or the 2461s, so I run them in this hook combination. But like I said, the B10Ss are definitely a good suitable sub. But I think that's everything that I wanted to say on this. If I missed anything, I'll put it in the comment section below. But if you guys have any questions, let me know and I'll get back to you. But thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next fly.